We've reached the end of materiality. Where does self-worth truly come from? Who am I? Where do I come from? Why am I here? And what my purpose is? At some moment, we wake up and realize that there is an unlived life and there's an unfelt body. And yoga gives you a tool to be able to find that answer for yourself so that you can kind of hear what I like to call a quiet voice of wisdom. How much is your presence, your awareness in your body? What level of presence do we bring into all of our interactions? I feel like the future is mindfulness, really. The untrained mind is your biggest enemy.
How long did you spend with Guruji?
About 10 years.
What was it like when Guruji passed?
You know, I think there was a spiral. And the spiral ended up with me going into a period of very, very dark depression. And I would wake up every day and I would plan different means for my life to end. And I would just sit there in what felt like the shattered glass of a broken heart. I was like, I am a yogi. Like, I do not take psychopharmaceutical. And so I still wake up some mornings and feel like I want to quit. And I go back to the practice, I go back to faith, I go back to belief, I go back to the foundation of the spiritual journey. And I keep going.
This week on the show, we have Kino MacGregor, and she is the international yoga teacher, author, and entrepreneur. You probably saw her doing these incredible handstand videos on her Instagram account with over 1 million followers. Some people say she wears skimpy clothes. Some people say she's turned yoga into a business and she shouldn't have to. But she says she does whatever she wants, and she is very congruent with who she is as a person. And let's face it, she is an OG of yoga. She's been going to India for 20 years. She trained with Guruji, one of the founders of Ashtanga. She put in 10 years of hard work, going there every 6 months, every year, whenever she could, whenever she had to. And now she is back to tell you that yoga can change your life because it gets you more in tune with who you are as a person. And I have to agree with her. My practice in yoga started 6 months ago after my documentary with Dorian Yates, and it has changed my life as well. And so we actually didn't talk that much about yoga. We talked about spirituality, what it's like to be a human, and how we really need to deeply connect with ourselves. And she's no stranger to having hard times, whether it was a young woman when she was 19 at NYU doing way too much MDMA, haven't we all? Or whether when Guruji died in 2013, she went into some major depression, and it's an amazing story. And I was so honored that Kino really got open and talked to us about the ups and the downs and the depression and the excitement. And it's just an amazing episode, and she's an amazing person. So sit tight, you're going to enjoy this a lot. And you're also going to enjoy what's coming in the next month, which is the Business Accelerator, our 5th class in history. This is our most successful digital course of all times. It's 8 weeks where I show you how to turn your passion into a business, the same way I did with London Real and turned it into a 7-figure media company. I am on these calls with you every single week, 2 hours live, pointing out what you're doing wrong, pointing out what you're doing right. We have a 96% completion rate. I've got Max Keeling, who created The Investment Coach, a whole business advising on personal finance. I've got Claire Lim in Hong Kong, who just opened up a movement space. I've got graduates doing amazing things. Would you like to be one of them? Well, come check it out right now. It's londonreal.tv/biz. There will be a limited number of places, so join me on this crazy ride and let me show you how you can turn your passion into a business. And now I give you Miss Kino MacGregor.
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Kino MacGregor, the international yoga teacher, author, and entrepreneur. You've written 4 books and have co-founded the Miami Life Center, as well as the very first yoga television channel, OmStars, which launched earlier this year. You are one of a select group who received certification to teach Ashtanga Yoga from the very founder himself in India, and you now travel the world helping others learn this practice. Your new book, The Yoga Assignment, is out soon. Kino, welcome to London Real.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
It's awesome to be here. I was wondering, when you land in London, do you consider our city one that has any yoga game?
Yoga game.
Are we up the curve when it comes to this practice?
Well, actually, I'm here in London this time to take classes with my teacher's grandson, Ashtanga Jois. So he's here, and there are probably somewhere between 200 and 400 people total for all of his classes. So I would say that yoga is really popular here in London. Whenever I come here to teach, I feel really welcomed by the yoga community here. And I feel like London and the United Kingdom in general really embraces yoga.
Is it because it's kind of got that colonial British connection, and so we're up the learning curve in kind of more Indian practices, food, culture, or do you think it's something else?
Gosh, I hadn't really thought of it like that. I feel like the thing that most draws people into the practice is the idea of the search for meaning and the search for something real. And I feel that the more sort of material possessions one has, the more we realize that permanent happiness cannot lie in the accumulation of material possessions or material wealth. And perhaps it's logical for a former colonial power to realize that happiness has to be found within rather than in the world without.
You remind me of my shaman, my ayahuasca shaman, and I did some ceremonies with her, and she's like, I want to go back to the jungle, but the plant medicine says my work is needed here in these urban environments where everybody gets a little mental. We get caught up with the Joneses. We worried about our title and our possessions and all that stuff. Do you think kind of yoga is needed even more in these major urban centers?
I feel like yoga is needed more in every human being because the human struggle, is so essential to the yoga journey. And the human struggle is really, who am I? What am I worth? Where do I come from? Right? And the more disconnected we are from our purpose and our meaning, the more we need that. And I'm finding that people as much in the cities are really yearning for that, as much as people who say live remotely and are trying to find meaning in their lives. So I almost feel, because I get this benefit of traveling the world and seeing really people from all over the world. I mean, I've been already to Asia and Australia and traveled a bit around Europe, and then been all over the Americas already this year, and the year's not even over yet. And I think what I'm noticing globally is that we're all searching for the deeper questions, answers to the deeper questions. And it's the idea of value and the idea of worth. Where does self-worth truly come from? Who am I? Where do I come from? What am I worth? Why am I here? And what my purpose is? And yoga gives you a tool to be able to find that answer for yourself, to be able to really attune your inner hearing so that you can kind of hear what I like to call a quiet voice of wisdom that's always been with you and is always ready to speak to you at any moment. And it's really through the quietness and the stillness of the mind that I think we can find that voice, that wisdom, and that's the sense of, that's real truth, and I think we're all searching for that. I almost feel globally that it seems a little bit like there's a critical mass, and we're searching for meaning, and we're searching for a way out of maybe what has been the accumulation of the idea of the rat race, getting somewhere through the accumulation of things, of objects, of materialism. And it's almost like globally, I feel like we've exhausted materialism. We've perhaps even exhausted our material resources. We're reaching resource scarcity in certain places, and we've reached the end of materiality. And it's the idea that now, again, I feel there's almost a global shift of where's the deeper truth? Are we ready for it globally? I mean, I really hope we are.
Yeah, and I do too. What are some of the signs you see that we're at this critical point where it's like, oh my gosh, this can't be sustained, or these people are obviously kind of breaking down a little bit?
Gosh, I think I see that in how many people have followed a career path that had been given to them. So, we've been fed these things, myself included, get a good job, get a good education, earn a good living, and retire someday. So there's this sort of dream of consumerism, this dream of, you could even say the corporate dream, or get a good education and get a good job and save money and retire. And there's many people that they started that path, and then at some moment they realize this isn't going to make me happy. And I meet people like this from all walks of life, from all countries, from all ethnicities, from all genders and all ages, that if some moment realized, hey, you know what, I'm going on this path and it's not making me happy. I was on that path too, and I woke up to a deeper truth at some moment. This may sound completely ridiculous, but I was on the path to, I really wanted to be, to work in law. But from the time I was a little girl, I remember saying to my parents, I want to be a Supreme Court justice. I want, in the United States, I want to change the world. I want to be a voice for minorities, and I want to be a voice of justice and truth in the world. And I remember that I started doing debate really intensively in high school to sort of get myself on that path and get into a good debate school, so then I could get into a good law school, and then and sort of go. I had the whole path. And then there was a moment in my senior year in high school when the debate season had ended, and I didn't have to prepare for the next year because I was going to school. I was going to college, and I had a few weeks off, and I woke up one morning and I just took a breath in. I remember I woke up, I looked around, and I thought, I am so much happier. And I scratched my head and I thought for a moment, I said, well, what's missing? And I realized that what was missing was debate, which I suddenly realized I have I've dedicated the last 4 years of my life to scheduled arguing. And I really saw debate as scheduled arguing. I argue with people on Saturday from 12 to 6, and then on Sunday, it's my weekend. I argue with someone again from 12 to 6 again, and then we're judged on who wins the argument. And I just had this sort of wake-up moment of, I don't want this to be my life. Mm-hmm. I don't want to do this. So I just dropped that completely. And I was in a little bit of a searching state of where am I going to go from here and sort of what's next. And I really had no idea.
You were kind of depressed at 19, kind of wondering what was next.
Disillusioned, for sure. Yeah.
And did you not know whether you're going to go to college at that point, and didn't know which way your life was going to go?
Well, I knew I was going to go to college. I mean, I just felt like, well, I'll still go to school. I guess I wanted out of my parents' house, and I love them dearly. I guess it's just every teenager wants out, right? So I knew I was going to go to school, but I had this sense of all the schools that I applied to were debate schools and pre-law schools. So I only had 2 schools that were not pre-law schools. So I felt like I applied to 10 schools. I think I got into 9 out of 10 or something like that. And then I sat with 2 of them that I was choosing between, because all the other ones were this sort of trajectory that I just sort of took myself off of when I opened up to another reality. And I didn't know where I was going to go from there, and I wasn't really sure. And, I definitely was a little bit lost and searching for a period of time.
Now, if I told the 19-year-old Kino that going inside your own body on a mat, maybe once a day for 45 minutes to 60 minutes, will solve all of your problems, what would she have said?
I think she would have said, what exactly is it that I'm going to be doing on this mat?
Okay, because that same question is asked by a lot of newbies, and even people watching us are going to be like, okay, how much can you get done alone with yourself on a rubber mat? And you're talking about it as the salvation and all of this amazing stuff. And how do you explain that to people?
Well, I guess there's 2 parts of it, right? So let's address the part of aloneness. Yoga is never meant to be an entirely solitary experience, although it is a solitary and individual journey. Let me explain that a little bit more. You are meant to learn from a teacher. You are not meant to sit there and think, well, what should I do today? I think I'll forward bend, or I think I'll back bend. I think I'll do this or I'll do that. You are meant to find a teacher who's a guide. And the way that the yoga practice works is that someone who's walked the path a little bit further holds a torch so you can follow in their footsteps. And then because you have a teacher, then this idea of faith and this idea of trust opens up, and this idea of understanding things that are not easily understandable by logic begin to really sort of take root in your heart. So first of all, you need a teacher. So for anyone out there feeling like, I just don't know what to do, I'm on a sticky mat and I'm here floundering around, you need a teacher. and teachers have become more accessible. My first real teacher was all the way in India, and I needed to travel all the way to India to meet him. Now you can have good guides that are available, at least at the introductory level, online. And so you can really find that connection to lineage, to practice, to tradition, and to real teachers in a just much more accessible way. So that's sort of the first level. You're never alone. You shouldn't feel like you're floundering on your own. If you do, you need a teacher.
All right, so that's part of the process, is this human connection, this trust, this learning of mastery from someone else. Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. And then the second part is really a notion that I call body intelligence. So we understand intellect, right? We understand it's measurable, your IQ. You can be sort of Mensa level IQ. You can sort of take a test and get into the gifted program as a young child. And then there's a recent development called emotional intelligence, right? The relatability and the empathy level that, you know, a person is able to really develop. And I feel like I want to present something new called body intelligence. How much is your presence, your awareness in your body? So this sort of modern life that you were mentioning before of, you know, we're in cities and we're running around and we have our to-do lists and we have all these things that are on our minds and we have a lot of things that are unprocessed, unfelt. So I feel like what's going on is at some moment we wake up and realize that there is an unlived life and there's an unfelt body. So there's this body that we have and we treat it, you know, just as a place for our heads to rest on this thing and carry our heads around. And there isn't a sense of aliveness, of feeling in the body. So the first thing that yoga really asks you to do is by twisting your body into these positions that are not always comfortable, you begin to feel areas of your body that are on lockdown, that you've really exited at some moment in your life. We exit the body for a variety of reasons, primarily trauma. When the present moment is too hard for us to deal with, we cut off a part of our body and we sort of detach ourselves from it. We escape from the feeling rather than really be present to what we're feeling.
Is that intentional? Like, do I just cut off my liver or my leg? I mean, or is that just something subconscious that happens?
I think that the patterning is sort of the patterning to escape or exit or cut off a part of the body is laid at such a young age that it is not really a conscious choice. It's not like someone's, you know, you're experiencing a difficult situation and you're like, oh, let me not feel, you know, my legs because of this. It's because something hurts you so much. You don't have the ability to process it, to feel it. You don't have the training and the conditioning and really the mental courage to just open and be present with it. So it's an automated response. It's sort of just a natural protection that comes up. Just like when you reach your hand into a flame, you pull your hand away from the flame.
Okay. So we've kind of locked down parts of our body. We don't know we're doing it. And we don't give our body the credit of it having feelings and kind of some kind of intelligence as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit more about the intelligence in my body? Is it emotional intelligence? What's going on in there?
Well, I feel like there's both emotional intelligence and wisdom really in the body. And a way for you to think about that is, have you ever thought about an answer, but it just couldn't come to you, like a really important life decision, and you think about it and you think about it and you think about it, and it's like, here are the 5 reasons why I should, and here are the 5 reasons why I shouldn't, and you sit and you vacillate between these two extremes, and then you can go into that mental storm forever, for the rest of your life. You can debate it, right? Literally, you can debate yourself. Should I do it? Should I do it? Should I do it? Should I not? Again, back and forth, and then it hits you, boom, like a moment of clarity, and you know it in your gut. This is what I'm going to do.
Right.
So it's wisdom.
And you said gut there.
Yeah.
And we use words like with my heart, and it doesn't feel right. Right. And so these are all references that our mind isn't figuring out that there are something in our body that makes us feel something.
Absolutely.
Okay. And we don't honor it in our current Western world and in this Descartesian view where everything happens up in the brain.
I think, therefore I am.
Yeah.
Right? And then there's the second, though, right? I feel, therefore I am, which is Rousseau, which is sort of a higher level, you could say, or not even a higher level, because I don't like to think hierarchically, because the thoughts are very important. I think, therefore I am. You know, the quality and nature of thoughts have the ability to really control what we're expecting and our expectations from reality. I feel, therefore I am, is very identified with the emotions, right? The emotions, the emotional world. But the body's intelligence is neither thinking nor feeling, but is being.
Right, right. Well, I started practicing some yoga about 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And I still want to hear what happened to you in India, so we will get back to this. But I did it on the back of filming our first documentary film, which I think I mentioned to you, and it was one of our most watched guests of all time. It's a 6-time Mr. Olympia, a guy who spent 17 years of his life building the biggest musculature possible. Probably the opposite of what yoga would do. And, he was known for being this bulk of 270 pounds, lean on stage and beating everyone in the world and being the most developed male body on the planet. And he invited me down to Spain, and he wanted to teach me how to lift weights, was one thing, but he also wanted to show me his new yoga practice.
Yeah.
And he got a message years ago that basically said to him, what's wrong with your body? You can't move it. You can't move your hips. And he just put the feelers out, and he started practicing this yoga. And it's this beautiful moment in this film where I take this guy that used to be this hulk of a man, and we're practicing yoga on the beach. And at the end of it, I almost cry, and it's this, all these emotions came out. And I find it with a simple yoga practice of an hour, sometimes things really come up out of my body, and I don't know where these emotions and thoughts come from, but I must say there's something there. And I come from an engineering background. I was very Descartesian for a long time. Literally, my body was there to carry my brain around to the next pleasurable experience.
Yeah.
And but I can't ignore there's something here. Do you hear this a lot from people?
Absolutely. This idea that the body can't lie. The body doesn't lie, and the mind can play mental gymnastics and trick itself into this or that, and sort of you can speak a lie with your mouth, but your body always tells the truth, right? And this is like what good poker players call it, a tell. Your body will always have a tell because your body's telling the truth, no matter if you're telling a lie. And this simplicity, this utter transparency of the body is something that yoga brings up to the surface in everyone, which is really, really beautiful. Because imagine if we could just be totally transparent and totally ourselves and totally in touch with all of our happiness and all of our joy, but also all of our pain and all of our loss, and not need to cut anything off, and just to be totally and completely present.
So it forces you to be honest with yourself and be present with yourself. So back to some of these components of yoga. First of all, there's a teacher there.
Yeah.
So there's a student-teacher relationship, makes you kind of embrace new things, trust. There's a human component. Then there's the time alone, and then there's the truth with the body. What are some of the other big components that you tell people when you describe yoga?
Well, there's an element of devotion and reverence. And this is the search for meaning, right? Because you may not realize that you're searching for meaning or searching for depth. But I feel like what ends up happening is that as we begin to search, or as we begin to feel, then what comes up, where we're led to, are these deeper questions, the spiritual questions. And this is something in that many people don't realize when they come into yoga, is that yoga is a physical discipline with a spiritual intention. So it brings you through the physicality into something that is transcendent of the physical. And it's almost like, hey, wait a minute, I didn't really realize I was doing something spiritual. I thought I was just doing a forward bend. But as you describe, emotions come up to the surface, and then it's almost as though when you finish your yoga practice, you go out into life, and life looks a little different.
Yeah, and it's strange because I've trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I've lifted weights, and I've done lots of body motion, but yet this, practice of these positions on a mat in kind of this scheduled way, and with this preciseness and body movement and intention and breathing, takes my brain to some level that so oftentimes would need a psychedelic component to go there. It still flabbergasts me, and yet I can regularly get there on a Monday afternoon. How do you explain that to people?
Well, gosh, I think the idea is that we all have the capability to know the deepest and most eternal truth. We're all built with that. It's in there inside of us. So it's in you, it's in me, it's in everyone who's watching. And it's the truth of the sentient being. We have a spark of the divine within ourselves. And it's all of the things that we do to divorce ourselves from that presence of divinity. And the yoga practice, I feel, is a gift of grace, because it's a tool that teaches you how to drop your mind into presence, to drop your mind back into that root, into the truth of who you really are. If we begin the traditional yoga teaching, yoga is the cultivation of the state of stillness. When the mind is still, you can perceive the truth of who you really are. All right, so who's the truth of who you really are? You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are not this body. You are a spark of divinity. You are a spiritual being. You are infinite and vast, and worthy of love, made of love itself, made of light. And then if we think about that as, we're walking down the street, it's overwhelming, If we think about it as we're getting on the subway or the tube, it's, we have no place to put it. But in the practice, as the poses, this unique combination of these poses, which organize the body to bring your mind into unfelt places inside of the body, the breath, which ties your mind, the conscious and the subconscious mind together, as well as your focal point, which is redirecting the organs of the senses from the external world into the inner world. Though that unique combination brings you a moment, an intimation, a memory, almost as though the shadow of the divine passes in front of your eyes. And it's one of these things where traditionally it's said that just to touch that for a moment, just to get a glimpse of that, leaves you eternally changed, forever changed.
When did you first feel that?
Well, I think after my very first yoga class, my very first Ashtanga yoga class, I did my first class when I was 19, and then I did some yoga out of books and some random classes. But when I was 22 years old, I walked into a guided Ashtanga yoga practice. And at the end of this practice, I still remember to this day, lying in the end in the final relaxation. My body was utterly exhausted, covered and drenched in sweat. And then I just felt almost like the vibration of my body settle. And then there was this silence in my mind. So as though that stream of thoughts, of likes and dislikes and preferences and just that never-ending inner dialogue, it just stopped for a moment. And it was that silence that forever changed me. It just really kept me coming back for more, because it opened up my mind to the possibility of peace. It opened up my mind to the possibility that there could be silence. Because I think up until that moment, I never experienced the silence in the inner world.
And you didn't have to go through 20 years of practice to get there. That would surprise most people.
Well, I feel like most people who end up really, really committed into the practice very quickly have some kind of epiphany moment, some kind of spark. And then you spend the rest of your life kind of getting grounded in it, because you can kind of get, a high. But that initial kind of enticement, the way I think about this is, well, you're married, right?
Yeah, well, I'm cohabitating for a long time.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, I'm married, and I still remember the first moment that I saw my husband, right? And so there's that moment, right? A wow moment. Yeah. And then there's the excitement of, you first meet them and something in your body kind of wakes up. And then if you're going to stay together for a long time, right? Then you have this idea that, hey, we got to work at this, right? We need to, learn how to respect and love each other, and what that means, in terms of respect and reverence and devotion and dedication. And I think the cultivation of a lifelong practice is like that. We have that spark, that wow, that gush of emotions, that rapturous ecstasy that comes. And then we realize, hey, we have to put in the work.
Right. And that's just like your practice. So the excitement is going to go away. You can try to get back there to revisit that excitement, but that's futile. You have to put the work in and then go to this long-term kind of respect of the art and respect for what it brings you every day, and not go searching for those highs again.
Well, what'll happen is if you hanker towards the highs, then you've essentially traded in the addictive mind for yoga. And so then you're searching for the next fantastic experience, when the experience of your body today is the truth, right? If you spend your life hankering or yearning for highs and running from intense lows, you're essentially doing the opposite of yoga. Yoga is stillness, equanimity, being open and available to whatever is, to whatever arises. And then what's amazing with that is as soon as you get into that state, well, it's like those those moments that you thought were epic in the beginning, that moment of wow, that moment of divine rapture, one of the things happens is that you kind of slip into a state where it's not that they're not there, but they're not as special anymore because you're living so close to that state.
Right. You said before you're a yogi 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
Not just when you're teaching or practicing. Can you explain that?
Well, the commitment is not just to do the poses, right? But to really embrace the yogi life. And so this means that the practice has to change the way you inhabit the world, and it needs to change and sort of bear impact on every decision. So to bring consciousness into every decision. There are moral and ethical precepts that are traditional in the yoga practice, but specifically what it means is being very, very aware moment to moment, to ask yourself, is this how I need to be asking? Or is this how I need to be acting right now? So, if you drive and someone cuts you off, do you need to honk your horn right now? And it's that, well, wait a minute. Maybe you do because it's safety and you're about to hit them. And so you need to let them know. So maybe you do. Or maybe you suddenly have an inner dialogue that you're about to latch on to about how terrible all the drivers are and how no one drives well anymore. And can you believe this? And da-da-da, and it can go on. And you can find yourself lost, almost in a trance of complaints. And as a yogi, that whole idea of the commitment to the yoga path is in that moment, you got to do your practice. You've got to draw your attention inward, follow your breath, root into your body, be aware of the unpleasant vibrations of someone cutting you off in traffic, and just observe them and feel them. And as soon as you give them space, well, they'll just go away. Every emotion has a shelf life as long as you're not feeding it. Right? So if you go and you latch into the complaint and then, oh my God, they're a terrible driver and look at the car they have and da-da-da, and then, again, a trance. And then you're in this kind of trance state where your mind is hooked into that for who knows how long.
Is this something your guru teaches you, or does this just become obvious?
Gosh, that's a really good question. My guru, Sri K Pattabhi Jois, whom I met in India, was a sort of like Yoda, a man of few words, but very wise words. And Guruji, as I called him, his instruction for the mind was you do your practice, you think about God. You live your life, you think about God. Right? And so this is really the highest call to truth. And so he wasn't really into much specific instruction in terms of your psychological inner journey. There are some really important texts that can help give some direction on that. But this is something, again, the practice itself is the foundation. If you've taken action that is outside the yogic path, like if, say, on the way to your yoga class, you honked at someone and beeped at them and flipped them the bird or something, as soon as you're practicing, that is going to come up to the surface.
Right.
And you're going to feel this remorse, just the sense of, did I really need to do that in that moment? Did I really need that? Who knows? Maybe they were rushing because they have a sick parent in the hospital. Maybe they were out of it because their dog passed away. Gosh, did I really need to beep at them? I'm so sorry.
Right. And so thinking of God, you didn't have to describe what that meant, but you can take it on as thinking, okay, think of the higher power, the higher purpose, and that'll get me out of the traffic that just got cut off.
Absolutely.
Okay. What was that like going to India, studying with Guruji, right? You're this white American girl going over there. Can you break it down? Like, what was it like? And what was it not like that I would expect it to be like in a Hollywood movie?
Well, the first thing that it was just very far away. It was just a very long airplane trip. I mean, it was almost 20 years ago that my first trip was. And so this was India, not as you would experience India today, but India before cell phones really hit the market, before the technology boom, sort of like a different India. And in India, some part of my heart is nostalgic for, and some part of my heart is really happy that, that there's a new India. So, the past is gone, we embrace it, we love it, and then there's the turning of a new page, and you love the new as well. When I first went to India, I didn't have anyone's address except for Guruji's address. So I remember that I read Guruji's book, and I knew I wanted to go to India. So I bought a ticket, and I got a 10-year visa out of pure faith, and because it was a better deal. I think that the 6-month visa was something like $100, and the 10-year visa was $120. So I felt this was a good deal. My mom said, "How do you know you're going to like it?" And I said, it's a leap of faith. And it was 24 hours of travel just to land in India.
Okay. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Miami.
In Miami. Okay.
So I'm a native Floridian.
Okay.
Which was a rare variety, but there's more of us now these days.
Okay.
And I landed in India. And the first thing that and still to this day, it hits me every time I go there, how similar the plants are to Florida. So there are palm trees in Florida. I was living in New York at the time when I went to India, and the temperature was more like Florida. So there was an element of my body that sort of felt comfy there because the humid air and the tropical sort of, plants and the foliage around, and it was, quite familiar. What was completely non-familiar was the language, the people, the culture. I went into a car that was sort of called a taxi, but with these old ambassador kind of vehicles. I'd never seen one of those before, and I got in the back, and it was like a 4.5-hour journey, and this car dropped me off at the house of Sri K Pattabhi Jois, which is where he was teaching, and I just dropped my backpack and walked in, and the Guruji was the first person I saw. And he looked at me. You had to write a letter in order to request being able to get into the yoga shala, and the rule was if you don't hear back, you can go.
What does that mean?
That means you send this letter and you buy a ticket from Faith. And if you don't get a letter back from Guruji saying you can't go, you're good.
Okay, that's fascinating.
The opposite of like Travelocity confirmations or whatnot. You know what I mean? We get like a travel confirmation. It's the opposite of that.
That's the first leap of faith, really.
It was then. Now it's much different. Now you get a little confirmation. Things are quite different now. But so I dropped my backpack. I walked in. I looked into Guruji's eyes, and the first thing he said to me was, "You wrote letter?" And I said, "Yes, Guruji, I wrote the letter. Tomorrow is 6 a.m. You come." First thing I did, my face was on the ground. My hands were on his feet in the traditional gesture of pranam. And I had all the people said you have to bow down to him. And I didn't want to bow down to someone I didn't know what this meant. I'm going to bow down to someone. I was studying feminist studies in graduate school. And I had spent a lot of time on the plane thinking of how I was going to explain that while I do respect this as an element of traditional Indian culture, you see, I'm a modern American woman and I don't need to bow down to any man. Thank you very much. And I had this whole spiel written in my head. And before I could say what was up or what was down, I was flat on the ground, my hands on his feet. Thank you, Guruji. It was like my heart leapt up and took over. And I knew I'd met my teacher at that moment.
Why? Why did you do that?
My heart just leapt up. Why do you fall in love with someone? Something in my heart just said yes.
Felt the energy.
And I think what it was, and I look back now and I can see I guess there were two things. The first is that I'd never met anyone like him in my life, and it was just his presence, his power, gave me faith and gave me hope, and it was as though I was in the presence of peace when I looked into his eyes. And so I wanted that. So it was like something in me said yes. And the second thing was that he was an answer to a question that I was asking. I didn't know I was asking it, which is, how to believe in yourself, how to have faith. And how can I live a more peaceful life? That's really why I started the yoga practice. And Guruji was that answer to me. And he gave me faith, hope, and really a foundation for the practice. And I'm just so grateful for that.
There's a line from our recent movie where Ido Portal says, when you find the right teacher, learn whatever it is they have to teach you.
Yeah.
Is this a component that you feel with him? As in, he's really teaching you about yourself. In this case, the practice was yoga, or is it kind of more than that?
Well, if you ask Guruji, you asked him, oh, you're such a special man, like, oh, you must live in the state of what's called in Sanskrit ultimate samadhi, which is like this final end result of the practice of yoga. You're in final peace. And Guruji would laugh and he would just say, I'm a simple man. Just they teach you Ashtanga Yoga. Inhale, raise your hands. Exhale, fold forward. And so he really was just presenting himself as just this yoga teacher.
Okay.
And
that wasn't a tongue-in-cheek joke.
Yeah, no, he really meant it. He said it again and again, and I think it's the idea that he just wanted to be a person. I am a person. I'm teaching you this method. Don't worship me. This is a method, and it's up to you to apply the method. And that was very important for him. The methodology of the practice. And at the same time, so there was always this, this sort of dualism of I'm this simple person. But when you were in his presence, there's something that you realize, wow, you say that you're simple, but whenever I'm with you, whenever I was with Guruji, it was as though all of my obstacles, all of my, all of the things that were bothering me, just if I were around him, he was in the room, it was like they were gone.
Wow. And what did he teach you?
Well, Guruji's main lesson to me, there's so many lessons, right? But Guruji's main lesson to me specifically was to be stronger. And this is something, I'm not a naturally strong person, not physically and also not emotionally. I can kind of cave in and cry, and I used to have a really thin skin and just take everything really, really personally.
But wait, you went to NYU, you get your master's degree in feminine studies, you're in the big city. That doesn't sound like a weak woman.
No, I guess not. But I would at the same time fall apart like at every moment, and just take. And the other thing that I really kind of had no backbone about is I used to just say yes to everything at all times, just like everything is okay. But sometimes things aren't okay, and so I just kind of was this amoeba that was just sort of floating around the world, and practice wise, like I couldn't do a headstand, I couldn't do a push up to save my life. I was so weak. The idea of doing a handstand was beyond anything. And and another thing that was really difficult for me to take was criticism. So if I did something and if I got a bad grade in something, it would break me, and I just and if someone spoke harsh words to me, then I would think about it for days and days and days after, remember it 10 years later, And so this would really affect me. And I remember Guruji as just saying to me, whenever I reached a point of self-satisfaction, whenever I reached a point in my practice where I thought, okay, this is it, Kino, you have to be stronger. Kino, you have to be stronger. How strong do you need to be? Kino, you have to be stronger. Just again, and when I thought I was stronger, when I thought this is it, when I thought these are all the poses I'm ever going to learn, I'm good, I can finally do that handstand. Kino, lift up more. Kino, you have to be stronger. How strong do you need to be? And I kept on thinking, like, what is this? And now I look at my life, and I don't know what it is and how Guruji saw this in me, but I have met so much criticism. I have met so much difficulty and adversity in so many situations in my life. I'm not someone that in my life people have told me yes right from the beginning. Everything that I've done has been met with no, 1,000 no's. Kino, you have to be stronger. How strong do you need to be? Strong enough to believe in your dreams and never give up. You want to try this headstand and you're not going to do it? So this was my the first time I did headstand, I fell over. I almost cried. Poor me. I can't do headstand. Poor me, And then I got up and I tried it again. Get back up, try it again. Okay, fall down again. Get back up, try it again. Fall 1,000 times, get up 1,001 times. Try it again, do it again. Learn how to move the mountain that seems impossible with faith alone. And this is something I learned in the practice. So it took me a year to do headstand. It took me 2 years to do a forearm balance, 5 years to do a handstand, 15 years to do other poses. Think about this. What is your dream? How long are you going to work at it when the world tells you no? When everything says you failed. That didn't work out. You failed at that. That didn't work out. You failed at that too. That didn't work out. It's been 10 years. You've been trying to live your dream. Are you going to quit today? Or are you going to keep believing? If your dream takes you 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, are you going to stay the course? Kino, you have to be stronger. How strong do you need to be? As big and bold as your dreams are.
And he said that to you, or that's your
all
part?
He said was, Kino, you have to be stronger.
And he was?
Yeah.
Do you think he knew he was teaching you that it wasn't just physically stronger?
He would have to have known on some intuitive level, because there were other people that were basically doing worse than I was and didn't get told to be stronger. And so that was also something that was kind of this Zen riddle about practicing with him. Someone would be doing one pose and from the outside, it looked slightly disastrous. And Guruji would walk up and say, oh, good. And you would think, what's good about that? Then he would look at you and you would think again from the outside, all of like the Olympic, marks of like the alignment is good here and the shoulder is good and this is an alignment and all that. And he would come up to you and say, oh, bad. And you're thinking, well, what's bad? And so it was never this kind of cookie cutter approach. It was really about meeting the person where they were and giving them exactly what it is that person needed to grow.
Wow, sounds fascinating. And you obviously got this stronger message because you seem pretty strong now.
Yeah, it's still something I think about every day. I like to think that I'm stronger now, but there's still dreams, it's still things that I face, and honestly, since the time I look back and I can realize this, and it's come about in the last couple of years that I've realized a pattern in my life that I can trace back to the time I'm about 9 years old, is that I've suffered through periods of cyclical depression. And during these periods of depression, I wanted to quit on me, on life. And so I still wake up some mornings and feel like I want to quit. I know what to do with it now, but it's not like it's gone.
Right.
I still wake up some mornings and I think, man, is anybody listening? Does it matter?
And then you go back to the practice.
And I go back to the practice. I go back to faith. I go back to belief. I go back to the foundation of the spiritual journey. And I keep going.
Okay. How long did you spend with Guruji?
About 10 years.
Okay, that's a long time.
Yeah.
There or back and forth?
Back and forth.
Okay.
So my first trip was 2 months. My second trip was 6 months in India. My third trip was 6 months in India. So I sort of, uprooted my life and spent a lot of time in India and kind of just went back and forth between traveling, living abroad, and sometimes going back home to see my parents and then being in India. I found out very quickly that if I didn't have an apartment, I could very easily save a lot of money, which could get me a long ways in India. So I sort of moved back in with my parents after graduate school and just said, Mom, I'll be here for a little bit. I'm an only child. My parents were pretty happy to have me back. And I practiced in their garage, backed out their car and practiced in the garage and taught yoga classes and saved all my money and went back to India.
Wow. And this is 10, 15 years ago?
This is about
20.
15, 17 years ago.
Okay. Before Instagram, before yoga became
before
popular.
YouTube.
Before YouTube. Oh my gosh. Not before YouTube. Say it ain't so. Wow. Okay. So, and just so people know, you were learning Ashtanga Yoga from Guruji. Can you give us quickly a brief history of even yoga and why Ashtanga as opposed to another practice for people that just don't know? Because I'm guessing you know this stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I'm not a yoga or Sanskrit historian, but I'll give you the best soundbite that's possible.
Okay.
So yoga is an ancient spiritual practice that's grounded in the inner search, right? And yoga as a spiritual path is really as old as humanity itself, and it can be traced back to the time of the rishis, which is the time of the Vedas, over 5,000 years ago in India's historic past. The yoga tradition was always meant to be, again, part of a spiritual journey that was meant to be taught in what's called Guru Parampara, which is direct transmission from the teacher to the student. So it's never something to be done kind of on your own. You always have a teacher. Who is the original teacher? God is the original teacher. And this is the idea that the yoga practice itself is a gift of grace. It's a gift of knowledge. And this is a sacred spiritual practice. Now, yoga then gets passed on in various shapes and forms in different traditions. And there's this concept of asana. And asana is the physical practice, which is a foundation to create health and healing in the body, and also to create stillness in the body. Now, we have the sort of codification of a systematic approach to asana documented about 500 years ago in a text that's called the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Hatha Yoga Pradipika is beginning to talk about and describe in detail how asana itself, the yoga poses, actually begin to create energetic shifts and spiritual awakenings in the body. And then this kind of continues in different lineages and different practices into our current day experience of yoga. The most important thing to find in yoga is to have a practice that has a lineage, not just a charismatic and beautiful teacher, but a lineage. Because if you have a teacher who's not a student, the question becomes, I would say it becomes questionable about how much yoga, in a traditional sense, that person is doing. Not to say that they can't be an amazing teacher and an amazing spiritual voice, but it's the question of, if you're going to be practicing yoga, look to see has your teacher been a student? Have they gone on a transformation? Do they continue to practice themselves? Because this is really, really important when we begin to kind of loop ourselves into a style of yoga. Whether it's Ashtanga yoga or any of the spiritual lineages that are available in yoga, the poses themselves, I think, are secondary to, or the order of poses are really secondary to the notion of a spiritual lineage.
Continue watching this fascinating conversation for free by clicking on the link below to visit our website, and I'll see you on the inside.
Be willing to put in the work, right? Dream big, but don't wait for someone to knock on your door and deliver it to you. Put in the work and be humble about the work. So don't come in with the chip on your shoulder, I'm awesome and I deserve all this. Come in and say, how can I contribute? What can I add to this? Right? Be willing to put in the work. Dream big and work your ass off.